Hello, everybody. Welcome to Peggy's Recovery Corner. We are here today. This is a recovery podcast. We talk about all things recovery or lack thereof, depending on how you roll, who you are, and what you consider recovery. I mean, maybe to you, recovery is recovery, but either way, um, we are here today with a very special guest and friend. He is somebody that I've known for a lot of years now. Um, He actually, we worked alongside each other as case managers. He was already there before me. We were at a place called Rock Solid in Costa Mesa, California, many moons ago. I think back in 2014. He was there before me. He taught me the ropes. He showed me what to do. He showed me how to go about it. Everything I'd learned in school, he was already doing. And then we were kind of part of a dream team. We worked alongside each other with a few other people, helping a lot of people, and some of those people are still success stories to this day. So, his name is Richi Chapman. Richie, welcome to the corner. Good to
Yeah,
have you.
we'll
So, Richie,
be here. Thanks, Pej.
you're welcome. Thank you. Um, we want to talk about you today. Usually, what we do is we delve into your past and see who you were growing up. Where you were born, where you were raised, how you were raised, some of the things that happened in your life, what you got into, and then we'll get into the recovery part. Obviously, the topic for today is, can somebody gain sobriety after a relapse? And I do believe wholeheartedly anybody and everybody can, especially you. You're a living testament to that. But let's talk about you first. Where were you born? Step
East. Yeah,
It's kind of pausing a little bit, but
yeah. It was. Oh, is it jerking on us?
yeah, we had a perfect connection before. But go ahead and keep talking. I think you're good
Hmm.
now. It cleared up. So
Okay,
born
cool.
where? Raised
So
where?
yeah, East LA. Was kind of raised all over. My mom and dad. My dad was an alcoholic and in and out of the rooms of AA for a long time, and so we moved around a lot. Kind of grew up in Upland, San Bernardino County, in Riverside County.
Hmm.
In Riverside for a while, and my mom and dad divorced when I was about 10 years old,
Hmm.
and my mom remarried when I was 11, and we moved, my mom and I, to Laguna Beach, California, when I was 11, 12 years old. Yeah.
Okay, so just you and your mom moved there. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so just mom and I, and my mom remarried to a man named Ron, who's my dad today, and yeah, he lived in Laguna Beach, and yeah, we moved when I was about 11 years old to Laguna.
Now, when you say
Yeah, it was
East
in.
East LA, like which part of East LA? The rough part or the not so rough part?
um I don't even really know. I know that when we would be driving on the freeway, my mom would always point out the hospital that I was born at, but I don't know exactly. I'm not super familiar with Los Angeles, so I don't even know the exact area.
I think I remember back in the day when you and I were working together, and I told you I was going to move to LA. I remember you telling me like you don't really go to LA, and I'm like, really? It's that close, and you don't really go, or you haven't really gone? Okay,
Yeah.
so you ended up in beautiful Laguna Beach, 11 or
Hmm.
12 years old.
Yeah.
Was there siblings? Did you say or no?
Yeah, so I grew up with three older sisters, but they were all moved out by the time my mom and dad divorced,
Mhm.
and then my stepdad had two children my age, so I had two step siblings when we moved to Laguna, and it was an environmental and social shock when I was going from Riverside Upland to Laguna Beach. Like it was a shock for a teenager, I think. You know, I.
But it must have been nice. I mean, at least to be in an area where there's beach. I mean, everybody out
Mhm.
there in Riverside wants to come to the beach cities as much as they can, and you were right by the beach. There's no part of Laguna that's really not close to the beach.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a dream. And to be honest, I wish I could have appreciated it more when I was a kid. I think when you're a kid and your parents are going through a divorce and stuff like that, I mean, it's just hard to appreciate those things. When I go back to Laguna, because my mom and Stepdad still lived there. And in fact, we're coming out there in July, but there's so much appreciation I have for it now, yeah, but I was just trying to make it through those times,
Right. So growing up down there, I mean, what was it like? I know divorces don't sit well with a lot of youngsters. I know it didn't sit well with me either. Some kids would love for their parents to get divorced; they're totally fine with it. But it definitely messed with me. So it sounds like it didn't sit well with you. But during that time, what was it like growing up in Laguna Beach? I mean, what were you doing? Were you hanging out with certain types of people, doing certain types of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Growing up in Riverside, I had to be really careful with who I hung out with, and I think I grew up not trusting people, because in Riverside, if I looked at somebody the wrong way, I went to a middle school of over 2,000 kids, and then I ended up in a high school in Laguna with less than 800. So
Hmm.
everybody knew everybody in Laguna. I mean, and so I was the new kid, right? And so I didn't trust people. And when people would invite me in, like I remember one of my first days in middle school, I had this kid at lunch like say, "Hey kid, come over here, new kid, come over here." And I was like, "No, I'm not coming over there. If you want to hang out, you can come here." So I was very standoffish because I just didn't trust people. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know who to believe, and I just felt awkward and out of place. And so I quickly realized, especially in high school, that I could kind of befriend everybody. I kind of turned into a chameleon where whoever was in front of me, I would just kind of adapt to that environment. I would adapt to that lifestyle. I would adapt to that type of language. I would adapt to whatever hobbies they had. And I could kind of fit my way or wiggle my way in socially. And that's what I began to do. And so really, I was kind of friends with everybody and anybody, once I fast forward a little bit and kind of realized, these kids are just they're just different in Laguna. It was cool going to the beach. Obviously, we went to the beach all the time, and you know, they're yeah. But that's kind of how I got into drugs and alcohol. I was terrified of alcohol. I think the first drug I ever did was I smoked some weed when I was like 11 years old with my cousin, and the first time I drank was 15 at a house party on a Friday night, just because I wanted to fit in and I wanted to, like I said, adapt. I was invited. I went with my buddy Jimmy at the time, and my first drink was 2 40s of King Cobra. And the seniors, I was a freshman, and the seniors duct taped both the 40s to my hands and told me that I couldn't pee until I finished both 40s. And didn't take me long to finish those things.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's pretty interesting. I like that.
yeah, yeah. That was a wild night. That was my first drink. That
Some
was
initiation shit.
yeah, yeah, it was.
Now, academically, how were you doing when you were going to high school?
Well, I always tell people I went to high school for the high part, not the school part. Right?
Right.
I socially I was doing very well. Academically, very poor. Um, I wasn't doing well academically. I didn't like school very much. I didn't
Mhm.
like the academics. So except for like extracurricular, like I was very creative. So I joined theater and I was in acting and I loved that. I was good at it and I really took to that. I was in a dance production team. I love dancing and doing salsa and swing dancing and partnership dancing. So I excelled in that. But anything with like English or math. I liked history, although I didn't like some of the teachers that I had in history. And so if I didn't like the teacher, I tended to do poorly, kind of goof
Was
off in class and stuff like that.
was this at Laguna Beach High?
Yep. Yep.
And was this before they started filming the show in that area, or was it after?
Yeah, so I was a senior when MTV came in, and in fact, when MTV came in to film, they wanted to do it on our class. So I was the class of 2002, and the school could not give permission, and so MTV went to parents and started getting consent from parents of specific kids, And they ended up making the show about the kids that were a grade or two younger than me. So 2004, 2003. And my big claim to fame, Stephen Coletti, was one of the main characters on Laguna Beach. And in 8th grade, I dated his older sister, Lauren Coletti. And so that's my big claim to fame for that show. But we would show up to parties and MTV would be there. And to be honest, dude, I wouldn't even stay at those parties. At that point in my drinking and drugging, uh, I wanted to party, and I like to party the way that I like to party. And MTV kind of ruined that because they would try to stage things and make people be quiet. And so me and buddies would show up or whatever, and then we'd just split. Like we'd be there as soon as MTV would be there. We were like, we're out of here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as like, did you end up finishing school on like when you were supposed to, graduating on time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my last semester of senior year, I opted out and I went to a continuation school because I had so many credits to make up that I wasn't even going to be able to walk with my class. And so I was going to have to go to summer school. And if I went to this continuation school, I could finish on time at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I ended up doing. So I went to continuation school, didn't graduate, didn't get to walk with my class. I went to the senior parties though. I did go to those, and
Yeah.
but yeah, it was kind of a bummer, man. Like again, so this is the progression of the disease, I think, of alcoholism and drug addiction, man, because a lot of the things that I really enjoyed, it already started to take things away from me. I was cast in the senior show of this musical called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and my director, Mark Dressler, at the time, casted me as the main character, and he literally picked this show for me, and he cast me in it, and it was in the second semester of my senior year. That's when it was going to show, and he found out that I wasn't going to be able to make it, and so I didn't even get to do that show, man. And that was like a huge dream of mine to continue and pursue acting, and yeah, drugs and alcohol took that from me, man. So I didn't get to do that show, and then it was kind of downhill from there, man.
Downhill in what way? Like what happened moving forward, like into your young adulthood?
Well, drinking beer and smoking pot started to progress in taking and Vicodin and doing cocaine, and I was a assistant manager of Domino's Pizza, and I started dealing weed, and then when I was introduced to cocaine, I started dealing that as well, and I would deal it right out of the door of Domino's, and I started hanging out with kids that were further along in their drug journey, I think. And so I was introduced to methamphetamine, to heroin, and it just became who I was. It became my identity. I identified with those guys. Two close friends of mine at the time, their name were or still are Russell and Ray, and Joel, and we used to just run around town and all over, and pick up drugs and sell them, and party at the house and do a bunch of hallucinogens, and my buddy Corey, and yeah, it just became about the drugs and the alcohol and the party and trying to keep that going as much as we could. Like I remember one 4th of July, like being so out of my mind, and walking barefoot because I had lost my sandals, and I was so drunk and so loaded. I walked, I don't know how far, barefooted, trying to get to my girlfriend's house at the time, and just miserable. I remember that night being a night where I was alone. It was one of the first times that I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? I was probably like 18 or 19 at this time, and yeah, it was miserable, man.
Now,
Yeah.
I remember your first attempt at getting sober was how old were you? 24?
Yeah. Well, yeah, technically, the first time I ever really gave it a try, like I said, my dad was an alcoholic and he was in and out of the rooms. Like one of my first memories of an AA meeting was when I was like 6 years old, man, with my dad, to be honest. And so when I was like 18, I was starting to get introduced to outpatient centers and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
because there were consequences that were coming up. I had been in multiple fights where there was I had assault on my record. I had a domestic violence case against me, and so I had been arrested a couple times by the time I was like 19. You know, and so I would get let out of jail because of these drug charges or whatever, or drunk in publics or whatever, and they would assign me outpatients or treatments, and so I would go to those just to try to get the man off my back a little bit and try to please my parents. But yeah, it wasn't until it got really bad when I was 24. I eventually got arrested for a residential burglary, and I was drunk one night and high, and like I said, I had already progressed at this point doing meth, and I was invited to this after party at 2 a.m. So I must have been like 23 at this point, but everybody passed out, and I ransacked the house. And it was about 6 months later, somebody identified me in a Laguna Beach high school yearbook picture, and my parents' house was raided at like 4 a.m, and the cops came and picked me up, and then I went to OCJ, main jail in Orange County, when I was like 23, and I was fighting this case. I was in county jail for about 8.5 months, fighting this residentially with a strike. They were trying to give me a strike and all this stuff. And, or no, I was there for 10.5 months. I'm sorry, not 8.5. I was there for 10.5 months. And eventually they let me out, time served. They gave me 5 years of formal probation, community service. I had to do like a domestic violence class. I had to like do all this stuff. And they gave me a joint suspension, which meant that the minimum for my charges was 3 years in prison, in state prison. And so joint suspension said that they suspended that sentence if I completed successfully my 5 years of formal probation. So they let me out, and they gave me 5 years probation. And so I was out for about a year and a half, and I couldn't stay sober, man. That's when I went to the Salvation Army a couple times. I got kicked out of there. I gave my probation officer like 15 dirty drug tests, man. And then it was May 8th of 2009. I walked into my probation. My stepdad took me. I was supposed to work with him that day. He took me to probation to check in with him, and I didn't come out. My probation officer put handcuffs on me and sent me to prison. And that was that was May 8th of 2009. I was 24.
Okay, so it was outpatient programs was the only amount of rehabilitation that they were giving you. You didn't go to inpatient treatment. You were pretty much going to prison, correct?
The only inpatient that they did try to sentence me to was Salvation Army. And I was in Salvation Army for about 40 days, and I got kicked out of there for stealing. Surprise. Yeah. Yeah.
Salvation Army over in Anaheim?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The mothership.
Yes. Okay, so then you went to prison for how long?
I did a turnaround. That's when, I was there. I was sentenced to 16 months, but they gave me my 10.5 months that I had served in county as time served. So I actually only did 6.5 months when I was in prison. I did 2 months in reception in Wasco. Or no, I was in county jail waiting to go to prison for 2 months. I went to Wasco State Prison for reception for 2 months. And then they sent me to CMC West in San Luis Obispo for 2 months, 2.5 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you got out, and what'd you do with your life?
Well, it's kind of what happened to my life when I was in prison, man. That kind of set me up and segued me into my recovery. So May 8th of 2009 was my sobriety date for a long time, Pej. I didn't get loaded. It was actually in county jail. It was the first time that I ever said no to drugs, because drugs and alcohol are available in county jails and prisons, even more readily available in prison. But I remember a kid crushing up some pills and offering me some pills when I was in county one time. And it was my first moment of clarity where I thought to myself, I'm in here because I can't stay sober. If I get loaded, doesn't this defeat the purpose? That was like my exact thought. And today I know that wasn't my thought, that was a thought of God. And so I said no. And I stayed sober in there, and I started to pray. I knew something had to change. I just didn't know how to do it. And I just knew that I couldn't get loaded anymore. If I kept getting loaded, I was going to continue to go down this road, and and I was going to end up being like my dad, because my dad was in and out of prison and drug treatment facilities, and I just didn't want that, man. And when I was in county jail waiting to go to Wasco State Prison, my aunt showed up and she told me that my dad was going to be in Wasco State Prison at the same time. And it was one of the first times I prayed a specific prayer. Um, and I just asked God at this point. I was like, God, give me, because I hated my dad, right? Like I hated who he was and who he had become. And he left me when I was young and all this stuff. And he didn't love me, and he loved drugs and alcohol more than me. And I just asked God to help me forgive my dad, like help me not hate him anymore. I also was terrified of going to prison, because I don't know what, if you see what sits before you, but this beautiful young man is going to get rocked in prison. You know what I mean? Like I want to believe I'm a tough guy, but really I'm a lover, man. And and so I was scared, and so I asked God to protect me, and then I asked us, which was odd because this wasn't like me either, but I asked God to put somebody in my dad's life that was going to help him and encourage him and set him on the right path. And when I went to Wasco State Prison, man, out of 6,000 inmates, I went to this dorm H4, and there was like 360 dudes in this dorm. There was two sides. There was an A side and a B side. And when I walked in, and there was a day room in the middle, and I saw my dad when I was in H4 in Wasco State Prison, and there he was. And in that moment, Pej, in that moment, I don't. People say that God speaks to them, right? Like I do believe God spoke to me, but it wasn't like an audible voice. It wasn't like all of a sudden there was like this, the
Sure.
clouds parted, all this stuff. It was a reminder of my prayer. And the reminder was, you wanted a chance to forgive your dad. I'm giving you that chance. You wanted me to protect you. By me putting you with him, I'm protecting you. And you also wanted somebody in his life to help and encourage him. Well, who do you think that is? And all of a sudden I realized I was the answer to my own prayer. And I was in prison with my dad for 2.5 weeks before he left to a mainline. And then I left 2 weeks after that. And
I got the chills right now, man.
yeah, yeah, me too. It's wild, bro. Like it's unbelievable to me still, like that happened, and that it's just a wild story, man. And I lived that, and yeah, and there was more. There was we don't even have the time, and I don't have the ability to go into the detail. But even when I went to San Luis Obispo, there was a lot of God things that happened, man. That like it helped me. I guess the big thing that it helped me realize was that there was something greater at work in my life. And it was undoubtedly, it was beyond a shadow of a doubt at this point in my life. I was at my deepest, darkest, most broken place, and the doors that opened, the protection that was given to me, the places that opened up, and like the opportunities that arose just started to happen. And when I got out of prison, I actually went to Pat Moore Foundation. I got 6 months what was called SAP at the time, which was State Assistant Program, and the state of California paid for 90 days of inpatient treatment facility at Pat Moore, and then
Really?
90 days of sober living and outpatient, which I went to Nancy Clark's in Costa Mesa, and that's where my recovery. Even though I was sober at 6 months at this point, it's when my recovery actually really began.
So, okay, this is interesting. I think it was around that time, perhaps, maybe after Nancy Clark's, maybe during, I don't know. I met you when I worked at a place called Morningside. You showed up with Jesse. I think it was Jesse from a sober living called Windward Way that was not yet a treatment center.
Jeremy.
Jeremy, that's it. Jeremy,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It
Yep.
was Jeremy that you showed up with. You came. I think you guys were bringing or picking up a client that was needing to either leave us or come back to us. I can't remember exactly what it was. I just remember you. I remember meeting you, being introduced to you. I thought, good-looking young man, like he got sober young. That's what I
Yeah.
thought, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't know about all this story. Now, that's when we met, and then I think possibly a couple of years later we re-met, and that's when I remembered you. I was like, I know you, Richie. Like, remember when you came to that detox over off of Orange Avenue in Costa Mesa, and you
Mhm.
said, oh yeah, yeah. Well, and at this point now we were working alongside each other. So
Yeah.
from what I remember about you during that time is that you were fucking really in the program. Like you were really involved in the program,
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
and you were instrumental in a lot of people's recovery, especially at that center that we worked at. What I saw is a lot of youngsters, because you were already super young, but you were their case manager,
Yeah.
and a lot of them looked to you to see like how one this young can become sober and really embrace their sobriety. And you were very comfortable in your skin. You presented yourself well. I sat in your group sometimes and watched the types of groups that you would run, and I was like, this dude motivates these youngsters. Like he's a real one. This is, and then on top of that, like when I had to get my feet wet and go from being like a frontline tech worker to actually doing case management, I was in fear. I was very much in fear. I was like, everything I've learned in school, I have to apply to my job right now. I'm getting paid a little bit more, which is good, but like I'm kind of afraid. But like you made me feel really comfortable. When Jerry was there too, he was kind of like the our samurai,
Jerry, yeah, Jerry Brown, yeah, the Yoda.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was the man. But
Yeah.
but you showed me like biopsychosocials, all these different things, like how to go about it, how to work alongside the therapists, and we had a really good team. Like I've always saw that as like the dream team because we had a lot of success stories that came out. Now I also remember you got married around that time. I think it
Yeah.
was probably a couple of years in, if I'm not mistaken. Um, right? You
Yep.
seem like you were really in love,
Yep.
and I really love that. And I love your wife; she's a great lady.
Yep.
What happened if okay? So if in 2009 you got sober, and how long did you stay sober for, and what happened?
Yeah. I was sober for 9 years, nine and a half years. And yeah, when we met, we must have met around 2011, 2012. And I remember that. I think I was the detox coordinator at the time at Pat Moore when we met at that sober living with Jeremy, because I think I
Right.
was picking a guy up for detox.
Uh-huh.
But I advanced in my career. I advanced in my recovery and practicing the principles of AA in my life. And yes, you're absolutely right. I was very involved in my own recovery and then also in the treatment world. And I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life, Pej. Like ultimately, that's what I wanted to do. I loved helping people. I loved helping the young guys, and I was very yeah. I was a road warrior for AA and for treatment, man, for a long time. And I think what ended up happening, and yeah, I met my wife in the rooms, and we got married in 2013, and yeah, we opened up the Wallace House, right? You and I and Jerry, and we were
Yeah.
at the Wallace House at Rock Solid for a while, and you're right, like we had a great team, and Greg, if you remember Greg, the clinical
Yes.
director,
Greg Young.
yeah, and I still remember some of the clients that are there, and I still see them today, and a lot of them are still sober today,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and it's so cool to see them and where their lives have gone, and but yeah, so I think what ended up happening, Pej, I mean, it's not a surprise, but what ended up happening was it became less about helping others and it became about helping myself. If that I'm trying to boil it down to make it simple, but there's so much complexity when it comes to that because it was insidious. Like that self-will was insidious. I did not recognize it. And insidious, by definition, is a power that is so strong. It talks about it in the big book. It's so strong that it has you before you even realize it has you. And once you realize it has you, it's too late. And that's
Mhm.
what happened to me is my self-will run riot became so insidious and so strong that it had me before I even realized it. Once I realized it, it was too late. And so I stayed sober for a long time. And it wasn't like I was not doing AA. I was doing AA for a long time. I was sponsoring dudes. I was working in the treatment facility. But ultimately I was what I was trying to do, what I was trying to build Richie's empire. And I ultimately did. Like I became a CEO of another treatment facility. I opened my own outpatient at one point. Like all of a sudden, it became less about the internal work of another man and helping that man, and it became, how can I promote Richi's agenda? And I started to fall away from AA. I stopped calling a sponsor. I stopped working with other guys, and I became kind of a workaholic in a way where, like I said, I was building this empire, and I made some poor decisions, and there was a lot of stuff that had ended up happening in my sobriety. I was probably dry out of my 9 years. I was dry at 6 years, I think. My last 3 years, I was super dry, where I wasn't really working a program at all. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't praying on a regular basis. I mean, I kind of was. Like, there was even one point I went to the church, man. I went to the church
That's what
every.
I was going to say. I remember like you had turned to the church, and
Mhm.
I wondered like, is he not going to be in the 12-step world anymore? Is he maybe part of the church's 12-step
Yeah.
movement? But I didn't know exactly what was going on there.
Yeah. Neither did I. Like, I had no idea, man. But yeah, I became the youth pastor at his place church, and that was an amazing time, man. And those kids, you want to talk about kids? Now I see those kids on Instagram and all this stuff, and they're like 20, some of them sometimes, and some of them still reach out time to time, but um, and that's when things got. Oh, you there? Okay.
Yes,
Oh, you're coming in and
it's
out.
cutting
Do
out.
you hear me?
Uh, I hear you, but it was
Uh-oh.
cutting out a little bit. But I got you now.
Okay.
So you were saying those
I don't know
kids,
if it's my.
you've
Is this
seen them
my
succeed
end or
too.
your end?
I think it's your end, but you should be good. It's
Yeah.
paused right. It's paused. Yeah,
Okay.
probably just keep talking.
Dang, that's a bummer. I was just
No,
getting
I
going.
I know. I hear you right now. So you were talking about the kids that were in his place.
Yeah, yeah. And when I left the church, I left to go start a treatment facility, and that's when things got pretty bad for me. And I was still sober, but and I won't spend a bunch of time. But I wasn't working a program. It was Richi's agenda again, and I made a very poor decision in my sobriety that cost me a lot internally. And my wife and I, at this point, had 2 children already, and we made the decision to move to Phoenix, Arizona, after a very poor decision on my part that I was hiding from everybody. And I hadn't relapsed, but I might as well had at that point. Yeah, and then without telling anybody what was truly going on, I picked up my family and I moved to Phoenix, Arizona.
Like kind of like a behavioral relapse, if you will, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
Phoenix of all places? What brought you to Phoenix, Arizona?
Well, at the time, Lauren and I said that God was taking us to Phoenix. But like I said, I was living a lie at this point, and I just needed to get away from what I was doing. I think I was trying to run away from myself, and I was trying to start new without telling anybody. And the Phoenix was the place that made the most sense because it wasn't too far away from my mom, and then Lauren has family here in Phoenix, so we wanted to be close to family. And then we also liked the economy at the time, and we had goals and aspirations to buy a house and to have another child, and get a little bit more quality of life for our dollar. So I was kind of looking at trying to raise a family, and I just didn't see myself being able to raise a family of 5 in Southern California on my salary.
Okay, so you said you hadn't when you guys moved there, you hadn't yet relapsed. Why'd you relapse, or what happened with the substances?
Yeah, so I tried to get connected here in Phoenix. Like, I got a sponsor, but again, I had this huge secret. And the sponsor I got here, like, I took an 8-year chip at this Tuesday night meeting. And I got a sponsor, and I called this sponsor, and I did steps 1, 2, 3, and 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I stopped calling the sponsor because it was literally I was just vomiting on him this huge secret that I had, and I had to get honest with my wife, and it rocked our marriage, and it rocked kind of our household. And I was walking around without a program, without a sponsor, without the fellowship of AA. I got a new job. I got out of the treatment facility, so I wasn't working in treatment anymore. And I wasn't really around recovery anymore. And in those 2 years from 7 to 9, I kind of convinced myself that I wasn't an alcoholic. Like, I had a new career. We had bought a house. We had 2 new cars. And it was all the material stuff that tried to convince my disease that I wasn't alcoholic anymore. And I told myself, I can have I can have a beer at a baseball game, or I can have a beer when I'm playing golf. I have a career. I have a family of 5. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. I've made amends for the things that I've done wrong. Like, I should be able to smoke a joint and have some beer. And one night, and I did so much that I ultimately convinced my wife to drink with me. And the night that we drank, we had 3 kids at this point. It was a crazy night. We were trying to bathe the kids. It was a stressful night. And I was just in her ear, like, let's get a drink, let's get a drink, let's get a drink. And she's sober too. She was sober at the time, 8 years. And she finally gave me the green light and said, go get a bottle of wine. I'm going to put the kids down to bed and come home with some wine. We'll have some wine together. And so I went there's a Walgreens right down the street from our house, because that's where you go to get the really fine wine, is Walgreens. And yeah. And bro, I remember, like, there's a big debate in the rooms of AA, I think, that does the phenomenon of craving happen before you drink or after you drink? Like, do you have to ingest it before the allergy or not? And we can go into a seething cauldron of debate on that.
Yes.
But I can tell you my experience. When I picked up that bottle of wine and I looked at it, with 9.5 years sober, and out of the program for a while at that point, but my first thought when I had it and I hadn't drank it, I had not ingested it, but the first thought was, this is not going to be enough. And I went over to the beer aisle and I got a 12-pack and I put it back because I didn't want to scare Lauren. I didn't want to scare my wife coming home with a bottle of wine and a 12-pack. So I got a 6-pack instead. And her and I, drank that night, and we finished both of those. We finished the bottle of wine together and we finished the 6-pack together. And I'd be lying to you if I told you it wasn't a great night, because it was. My wife and I connected very well that night. And like I said, we had been going through a lot of emotional stuff in our relationship. And so it brought us together. It brought, it was like a relief, right? The big book talks about a relief, like instant relief. And that's what it was for us when we drank. It was very, very quick, dude. Within like 2 weeks, and we didn't drink all day, every day at that point. But it was like 2 weeks later, we drank again. That night, the second night we drank together, we started talking about cocaine. And it was in October of 2018. And I drove out on a rainy night in Phoenix to go find cocaine, Pej.
Where?
And
to California?
No, I was here
just
in
on
Phoenix.
The streets of Phoenix, because I was like, You don't need to drive outside of Phoenix to get drugs.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is I didn't know anybody, right? I was sober 9 years. I didn't know anybody I was, no joke, I'm in front of gas stations asking people as they're walking in if they have any blow. Like, people probably thought I was a cop. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't end up getting it that night, but when I came home, my wife was so scared because we had 3 kids in bed that night. 3 babies, dude. They were 3 years old, 2 years old, and like 6 weeks old.
Right.
And we were just about to do blow. And so when we woke up the next morning, my wife decided that she was going to get sober again, and I got pissed. And I continued at that point to try to convince her and everybody else that I could drink normally. And thus it began a year-long just turmoil in my life, man, because I couldn't drink normally. I was hiding it. And I was traveling for work at the time, and I wouldn't show up when I was out of town to these jobs in these departments that I was trying to build, and I was lying to everybody. And I would try to get sober, and I got a sponsor out here. My wife kicked me out at one point. I went into a sober living. I tried to get sober. I stayed sober for like 30 days. I came home. 2 weeks later, I drank but didn't tell anybody. I was going to meetings drunk. I was lying to my sponsor, and I would be okay for a little while, and then everybody would find out and everything would fall apart. And that continued to happen for a year, dude. where I was lying to my wife, and living this double life as much as I could, I was trying to have the best of both worlds. Like I was trying to have the sober, Richie family life. And then I was also trying to have this like drink on the road, drink when no one's looking, and party life, the best that I could. And I was trying to control and enjoy my drinking. And just like the big book talks about. And I couldn't have both. I remember my sponsor at the time, well, he's still my sponsor today, but when I was going through it, I had a phone call with him one time, and he was like, Richie, you're not, you don't have the willingness it takes to stay sober, and you don't have the willingness to do the work it takes to stay drunk. Like you're on the fence. Like you're trying to do both, and you're fucked. You know, excuse my language. I don't know if we can use that language here on
you
on
can
your
use
thing,
that language.
but and it was true, man. Like I was that time, that year from 2018 to 2019. Again, I found myself in the deepest, like prison prior to that was the deepest, darkest. And then in 2018 to 2019 was the deepest, darkest place I'd been in, as well, on a different level.
Like a personal prison, if you will.
Yes. Perfect description of it. Yes.
So what changed? Why did you bounce back after the year of being out? I think it was right around I saw you online right around the beginning of the pandemic, and you
Mm-hmm.
had let me know that you had relapsed, but
Yeah.
you really seemed like you were gung ho about being in the program again. So what made you decide to come back?
So on September 11th of 2019, my wife packed up. Instead of kicking me out, she decided that she was just going to leave because it wasn't working. So she packed up all my kids and drove to California to stay with a good friend of ours, Britton, which I think you know Britton.
Yeah, I do.
But yeah, so she went and stayed with Britton. And September 11th, 2019, I got obliterated drunk that night. And I had 3 days sober at that point, I remember. And I got so drunk. That was a big step one experience for me because I didn't want to drink that night, but I had to. I came home from work. I had an empty house. I would lost my kids. I lost my wife. I had an empty spirit, an empty soul, all this stuff. And I went and bought a bottle instead of going to a meeting. And I remember thinking, I don't want to drink this. Richie, you don't have to drink this. You don't have to drink this. And I walked away from the bottle and I just screamed at the top of my lungs in an empty house, in this house that I'm sitting in right now. And I popped the bottle and I drank that night. And I, again, just made some very, very poor decisions. The next day I was supposed to go to work. It was a Thursday. No, it was a Wednesday when I woke up on the 12th of September of 2019, and I wanted to end it all, Pej. Like, I don't think I had a proactive thought of like taking my own life, but I just didn't see it going on. Like, I was so hopeless, bro. Like I was so hopeless. And I called my sponsor, and he owns a treatment center out here in Phoenix. And I was trying to get into his spot, and he was like, that's a conflict of interest. And I know you're big into ethics and stuff like that, and you can appreciate that. But my sponsor owns a treatment center. I was trying to get into his, and he wouldn't let me. Like he wouldn't let me into his treatment facility because he was my sponsor, you know. And so
I respect that.
I respected him for that. In the beginning, it hurt. Right in that moment, it hurt. It felt, but I respect that coming from treatment. Like I got it. I understood it. But what he did do is he made some phone calls in Phoenix to other treatment centers, and a guy by the name of Marcus came and picked me up on the 12th of September. And Marcus had seen me for the past year in and out of the program and getting 30 newcomer trips. And Marcus was a director at a place called Cornerstone. And I went into Cornerstone Healing Center in Scottsdale. And when Marcus picked me up, I remember driving and I'm checking myself into treatment. And I'm telling him all this stuff, all this AA stuff, because I'm really good. Like you said earlier, like I come from a recovery background. So I know all the things that need to be said to make you think that I know what I'm talking about, and that I know it's very, very much manipulative and just a fraud, like just a facade. And Marcus pierced through all that bullshit, dude. And he let me go on for a little while, but eventually he just finally just told me to shut the fuck up and just to be broken. Just be broken, Richie. Just fucking be broken. Haven't you had enough? Just be broken. And I'm sitting in the back of the CRV on my way to treatment, and all of a sudden I just started crying, dude, and it hit me, dude. Like, I'm losing my wife. I'm losing my kids. I'll get emotional right now because of like just how broken I was, dude. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I could not believe that this had happened to me again. And so he gave me the suggestion to be brand new. Don't talk about my 9 years of sober, my recovery.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that doesn't matter. Marcus said, those 9 years are keeping you drunk. You need to let that Richie die. That Richie's dead. He's no longer alive. Like, he's dead.
Powerful.
Super powerful.
Wow.
And that's what I did, man. I went to treatment at a place called Cornerstone in Scottsdale, and I was broken, and I did a 3-day silence retreat when I was in because it was suggested. I did everything that was suggested to me, and that's just what I started doing, bro. And my wife, I thought she was going to divorce me, man, and I got to a point. I remember when I was in treatment, praying and telling God, like, I'm going to tell God anything. But I remember saying, like, okay, God, like, if my wife is going to divorce me and she's going to take my kids, and if that's your will, I'll be okay. If I could just stay sober, I'll be okay. And I just had to get to that point, dude, where I was willing to do anything.
Is Cornerstone Estelle's spot? Is that
Estel? Yeah, Estel Wallace. Yep.
Good man.
Yeah.
I actually met him when I saw you again. So obviously, during the pandemic, I was kind of shocked. They asked me to speak out in this men's retreat that was in Arizona, in Prescott,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know. I don't know if I knew in advance that you were going to be there, but I do remember.
I didn't know you were going to be there.
Right. I remember showing up there and seeing you, and I was so stoked because, as I've told you before, like, I've always held you in high regards. You're a person that was not just a person that taught me how to work in treatment, but also just like a good friend, like just a good dude all around. I always just loved your spirit. So I didn't know what your relapse consisted of. I think you told me little bits and pieces while we were there, but to hear like the full detail of it and to feel the emotion and everything is so powerful, so fucking powerful because there's a lot of people that go into recovery from all walks of life, all different ages, that put some time together. Some of them put short amounts of time. Some of them have a few years, but they relapse.
Yeah.
They relapse. And personally, like what the old timers that taught me early on, they said, some people interpret like people coming in the program, staying sober for a minute, and then going back out as a relapse. To us, if they haven't gotten into the steps of the 12 steps, then perhaps it was just taking a break from using and drinking. But like when you're already engulfed in the process of the steps and you're sponsoring people and you're doing all that stuff and you go out, then obviously like that could definitely be interpreted more as a true relapse or a lapse in your recovery. The good thing is that you came back. And when I saw you at that event, we talked there a bunch, and then I also met people through you and people at the event, which I had Estelle on this podcast, and he's just a powerful force, such a good dude. Like, he's a real one. He sees things very, very eye to eye, like me, right, and you, I think, for that matter. So it seems, even though you're kind of far away from me, that from what I see of you, that you're on a really good path right now.
Yeah, I am. And I mean, it's a constant in and out, right? Like, I think AA and the principles and practicing the principles, like, one thing I think that the pandemic helped me with was it put me even more so in the middle of AA, and it gave me a vigor and a rigorousness to sponsor dudes and do everything that I could as best as I could to stay connected. And that's how it is still to this day. You know, it's a constant recommitment to the principles and the practices of what AA has taught me. You know, I still have my ego, and I still have this Richie's agenda that likes to creep up, and I still have this like pride and the selfishness and the self-seeking and this entitlement, and I still have all this stuff, man. But today, like, I keep a I keep a practice of humbleness and doing everything that I can to remain humble, to call myself out on BS, to sponsor other dudes. Like, I have a grip of sponsees. Even in this, I think in the last 2.5, almost 3 years, this time sober, I've sponsored more dudes in 3 years than I did in 9. Because I just threw myself back then, bro. Like, I'm not even joking you. Back then, I thought like sponsees are supposed to come up to me and ask me if they're supposed to come up to me. I don't know. It was just a backwards way of thinking that I had back then. I think I was just so much more egotistical back then and prideful. And today, like, no, like, I look at these newcomers that come in and they're my life raft. Like, I'm theirs, but they're mine. And I go up to them. I walk up to them. I keep myself in the middle of this thing and continue to remain humble and available to the newcomer. And that's kind of what I've done this time, because it means so much. My sobriety today, bro, is not, I don't want to use the word better than my 9 years, because there was a lot of great things that came from my previous sobriety. There was a lot of amazing people that I met, like you, and a lot of amazing things. And I got to meet my wife, and I had kids, and I had like all these things that happened. So that was great. But my 3 years, or close to, no fronts, has been so much of a deeper sobriety, like just a depth and weight that has come from this time.
I believe it.
Yeah,
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm beyond grateful. I'm astonished. I'm in awe of God's miracle of giving me another chance. My wife, like, oh my gosh, my wife, the goodness and the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness of my wife and who she is. And today I'm in my house with my 3 kids and my wife, and yeah, dude, like, things are good. So
You're a very lucky man too, because I know your wife personally, and she's just such a good lady. She's such a good lady.
yeah, she is.
Very, very good lady. I've always
to put up with me, man.
So real quick, I'll just show you what some of the comments were. I didn't know you know Isaac, but Isaac said Recovery Dream Team. He's the homie. Love Isaac.
Cool.
Lauren, hi from Texas.
Hey, Lauren.
Let's see, we got Kiflin said this story is of major importance. Jennifer Turner says hello.
Hey, Jennifer.
And then let's see, Aaron Spar, who just moved to Tennessee. I remember feeling just like that. And then Kiflin also says, when I went to cry help after having 13 years, my husband dying of an overdose, me working in treatment 12 plus years, having my own sober living for 10 years, I asked my counselor, please don't tell anyone what I used to do, because I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. The whole time I was there for 4 months, I just listened. I knew I had to do something different. I always need to remember I am one drink away, and to stay teachable. Just celebrated 9 years, April 29th. Awesome, Kiflin.
Yeah, Kiflin. Yeah, congratulations.
So I appreciate you coming on here today. I be watching you. I see your motivational stuff on your YouTube. What's your YouTube channel?
It's just Richi Chapman. I actually backed away from that. I was doing this life coaching and motivational stuff for a while, and I kind of backed away a little bit because, again, you want to talk about the Richi show? I started to have that ego come back, and I had to check myself on it, man. And so I actually stopped a little bit of it. I've kind of moved more towards partnering with my wife in our fitness journey. So we now are kind of a team on this fitness journey of trying to help people through health and wellness and losing weight and body fat. Because, dude, if you look at some pictures of me back when I drank like 3 years ago, Bro, I was
Yeah.
at the heaviest. Like not only was I miserable, but I was physically like just ugh.
Were you
And
puffy and bloated because of the beer?
yeah, I had this guy, Pej, you appreciate this. This guy that I met when I got sober again, RJ, and I don't know where he is. Pray for RJ because he's been in and out for a long time, and he ended up becoming one of my brothers in this time, and I just love him so much, and I don't know where he is right now, but RJ used to always say, "Where's the honey at, guy?" And I never understood. And then one day he told me, "Dude, when you came in, you looked like you were stung by 1,000 bees on your face because you were just so bloated and so red." And
Where's the
yeah,
honey?
where's the honey at, guy? And so that was a big joke for us for a long time. But yeah, man. So so I kind of moved away from the motivational stuff. It is still motivating, like the health and the fitness and the journey and all that it's kind of wrapped up into it. And so, but that's what Lauren and I kind of team up on that. So we get to do that together.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, great to have you on here. You're a beautiful human being. Give your
Yeah.
family, your wife, my best, and thanks
Yeah.
for coming on the corner. And I'll
Yeah.
talk to you again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pej. I love you, man. And I watch you and I just pray the best for you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Peace. Have
Yeah.
a good
God
rest
bless
of
you.
the day. God
Okay,
bless
bud.
you.
All right. Bye.